I want to thank you for joining us today on our webcast. I'm Dina Evans. I'm very happy to be with you. I'm the Marketing and Special Events Manager here at Looking Glass Cyber Solutions. I'm very excited about today's presentation. This is part 4 in our 4-part series of building successful threat intelligence programs. Today's session will focus on threat intelligence in action. And I'm excited to have with us today our Looking Glass presenter is Alan Thompson. He's our Chief Technology Officer. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Alan, and he will walk us through today's presentation. Alan?
Thanks, Dina. Welcome, everybody. I'm really excited to really show you some threat intelligence in action for our 4th-part series. So just to recap, we introduced some of the key requirements that any organization needs to consider when they're building or looking to build a threat intelligence program. We then talked about in part 2 a framework to take those requirements and start to look at what aspects of a threat intel program needs to exist, both people, process, the systems, and how all of that comes together to really make it successful. In the last part of our series, part 3, we introduced some very concrete examples of where, organizations may have different requirements for their programs, so physical security or global access or global awareness or threat intelligence that's specific to their organization, and then tune those requirements to specific aspects of the Intel program to make themselves successful at it. In today's part, we're going to introduce some key technologies that we found have been very important in threat intelligence programs that either we have provided to our customers as part of a product offering, or we support our customers through our threat intelligence services. There's a lot to go through today, so I want to jump into the sequence of the demonstrations. So we're going to be talking about 5 different technology areas and 5 different technology demonstrations. From the left to the right. So intelligence data is really at the heart of most everything to the right. So if you don't have good data, if you don't know what data you're really looking for or where you should be collecting data, then the other parts of this sequence really will struggle to get value and really bring value to the organization. So choosing the right data and looking at all of the aspects of the data that are relevant to your organization and making it successful in your organization is a key part, and we'll demonstrate that very quickly. The other demonstrations are around operations. So once you have the data, what aspects of processing of that data do you need to do to turn it into action or turn it into relevant information that you can act on? And that's the third demonstration where we will talk about some of the analysis techniques and some of the key parts of turning intelligence operations analysis. The fourth demonstration, we'll start to talk about how, as you consider both your own assessment of your own environment, but also your third parties, and look at how you can assess and what are some of the key things to consider when you're evaluating third parties, either before you do business with them or after you've connected through the internet with them, and look for threats associated with them. And then the final part is around threat mitigation, of taking all of these data, operationalizing it, analyzing it into rich, relevant data, assessing, and then determining what to mitigate on. And that demonstration will really wrap up the whole sequence. So with this first demonstration, we're talking about intelligence data. And let me bring up the demonstration browser. Apologize. So on the screen right now, you're looking at a live map that is receiving multiple different data feeds. And this is not fake data, it's actually real data. And we're looking at infection records. As you can see up here, we have infection records, phishing URLs, and malware URLs. These are 3 different data feeds where we have sensor networks and sandboxing to capture data associated with malware or instances of malware out there on the internet. Now, one of the key things that we've talked about in the past is making sure that you have coverage not just in terms of global coverage, which is clearly important, but also the different types of data that you're able to collect. So are you able to monitor different types of botnets or different aspects of cyber threat that may be relevant? You may be also really strenuous to make sure that you look at what is live and what is historical data. So as you can see here, as this is a live feed, we are seeing a significant number of infections that are occurring actively on the internet right now, and you can see them occurring in different locations. And you may immediately ask, well, what information is available on that infection? So what you can do is you can then start to look at, from your data feed, what infection information is available. So this is an example. This is a historical example for the purposes of the demonstration. But what you see here is we have a set of different infections over time. So we have as early as June 2015 all the way to July 2015. And for each infection, we have information about which IP information, what domain, what user agent, which country, its location if available, and a lot more context of the browser, the port that was used in the HTTP communication. So as you can see, there's a lot of rich information that is really important in this data feed. So rather than just looking for, when you're considering intelligence, don't just look for IP information or domain information. It's really important to be able to get real-time, full context associated with the infection so you can determine how to respond to it. So if I were to choose to decide I wanted to block this particular communication, I would have enough context to make that with confidence. So let's come back to this map for a second. Now, as you can see, there's lots of different information, and you may choose to decide to respond to a particular type of malware one way versus another in your threat mitigation capabilities. So as you look at your intel feeds, look to gather what type of botnets they're able to monitor and how real time is it. Are they providing you data once a day, once a week, or is it, in this particular example, updating literally every few seconds? And can I operationalize that downstream? And so if we come back to the demo sequence, the next part of a successful threat intelligence program is really looking at taking that data, as you just saw in the demonstration, and feeding it into a process to refine, to vet the data, to tag the data, to make it relevant to your environment. And so one of the key things is to not just consider the data, but also the systems and the people and the processes to enrich and to categorize and refine the data to the point where you have much more critical, relevant data to your environment. So with that, I will jump to the second demonstration, which if I close this window for a second, and I come to the Cyber Threat Center. What I'm showing you here is that pipeline of looking for specific aspects of data from threat intelligence data feeds, looking at the data and how it gets refined into a set of key incidents that are relevant to a particular organization. Now, the first part I want to show you is really how do you decide what to look for. So there may be multiple different data feeds. There may also be aspects of the data that you're looking for. So in this demonstration system, we set up to monitor Apple as an organization. We've defined a set of target terms for the CEO and some key employees, such as Jonathan and Ive. We also have target terms such as images that we may be monitoring for in terms of looking for brand abuse. So that's a key part of if an organization is interested in brand protection, they may be interested in monitoring for where their imagery or their corporate data is published in a place that it shouldn't be or is being abused. And there's various other indicators that you may look for in the data. The other part is, in this particular example, we chose to define a set of locations that we would be interested in seeing relevant intelligence associated to a physical location, such as an Apple store, an Apple headquarters, etc. And so what we can do is we can specify, the terms that we're looking for to refine the data coming from our threat intel feed, and location information associated with that data, so that if any particular piece of intelligence shows up related to a physical building, then that may be something that we want our corporate security team to respond to. So coming back to this dashboard, you see here we have a set of key incidents that have been refined from a large amount of data. We have gathered looking for 16 target terms, which in this case is fairly small for this demonstration system, and we found a lot of open source intelligence that mentioned those terms or included those terms or those images. That target data was then refined and viewed by both machine as well as analysts who vetted the data, and then that turned into a total of 537 key incidents that required further review or action. So if we look at the incidents, we have here an example where we have social media impersonation taking place. We also have at the bottom here domain violation with a fish. And we have a variety of different categorizations. So we can see the data, the raw data or the original data. And you can also see how the data has been enriched by both the machine as well as an analyst, in this particular case in November 11th, 2016, to further categorize the data to make it relevant to a downstream team that may act on that data. Now, if we come to the map, and we look at the physical related data, you will notice that the data is showing relevant events to specific locations. So in this particular case, I click on the event, and I see that there is an intelligence analysis associated with this particular location, and I'm able to then target that location, target that notification to our threat intel team or analysis physical security team to be able to respond to that event if it's, for example, being a rally. If I look at global intel, this is another aspect that organizations may be interested in, is that there's specific intelligence that's feeding through the operations team that are targeted at their organization, but there may also be relevant global events that have broader impact on the overall sector that business is in, or a much larger impact globally. And so we're able to collect that information and show that information globally as well. So if we come back to our PowerPoint, the next part of our demonstration is really talking about intelligence analysis. And what we want to cover here is really, once we have operationalized the data and we've done some level of vetting, there may be some customization required. There may be some additional deeper analysis that's required on the threat intelligence. So if I come back to our demonstration system, what I'm showing you here is our product called Scout Prime, and it's showing you some key parts of the data that's available. So up in this window here, we have a specific IP that we've searched on for demonstration purposes. We knew that this IP had some malware active in it. And you will see down below that there is a window that says APT1. Now, the key thing here is that we are providing an assessment of threat associated with this IP. But that may be only critical to certain people. So it's possible that you may want to tune how the system overall scores the data associated with this particular threat. So for APT1, if I'm an analyst that has decided that the criticality or the seriousness of APT1 should be lowered, then what I can do is I can actually lower the criticality, and that will actually update the score or the threat associated with APT1, and ultimately the score associated with the IP address. So as you can see down here, this particular IP address has a lot of different detections associated with different APT activity. And if I were to update this score, you would see the APT1 updating, and ultimately this IP address score change. And that would allow analysts to fine-tune the scoring system and the threats associated with those scores throughout the entire global internet. So if I was to switch to a third-party analysis view, I can see I have different sectors. I have the communication sector, the energy, emergency services sector, the finance services, chemical, etc. And they have an aggregate overall score of 18, 17, 34 respectively. If I were to open the finance services, I would see individual network elements that are in the finance sector. So an ASN, I have a CIDR block that has a particular score. It has 59 IPs. If I click on that, then I can see the various IPs that are in that CIDR block that may have infection. Now, most of these are actually scored 10 or lower, and that typically means that there are no infections on that CIDR block. But if we come back to collections, you can see an overall assessment of quickly of a sector without having to necessarily look at a large amount of data. So for example, here in the finance services, we have 1,913 individual pieces of threat associated with that sector. Now, if we go to the administration dashboard and we bring up the threat stats, another key part of being able to understand your analysis and your overall view of the internet is look at how much data you're collecting and where the associations occur. So we can see here we have 91 data feeds with 18,000 different unique individual threats aggregated across 82 million different instances. So we're seeing per day a significant amount of data that we're associating on the global internet across those 18,000 threats. So, it's incredibly important to consider as part of your threat intelligence program, not just the comprehensive collection of data, but also scale of data. And as you consider the scale, obviously a human being would never be able to analyze or understand or look at 82 million pieces of information without some sort of machine automation and vetting. And that's where it's really critical, coming back to the operations view here, to be able to fine-tune the scoring system and fine-tune the data relevant to your environment. If we come back to the next part of our demonstration sequence, so far we've taken a look at the data and what we're collecting. We've taken a look at operations and how to refine that into data that ultimately analysis can fine-tune. And then the fourth part of the demonstration sequence is around attack surface assessment. And this is where we want to introduce the concept of looking at third parties and how those third parties can be assessed and understanding in a threat intel program. If we go back to the demonstration system, what I'm showing you here is a dashboard that finds information about a third party or a set of third parties that you want to assess. So for the first part of this is really setting up a footprint of who you want to assess. You then can click on to who scanning that information. So what this dashboard does is it pulls data from a sequence of data feeds. So one of the things is infection records from our virus tracker product. We look at compromised credentials. We look at cyber intelligence data. We look at open source intelligence. We look at domain, and we also have integrated with a third-party product to do vulnerability scanning. So all of these tools are chained together and automated such that an analyst can click on an entity to do a scan or a third-party assessment, and the tool will go through automatically and gather all the data from those tools and present it in a results page, which shows you the various infections that may occur in that domain. We may show also any compromised credentials that have been exposed for this particular entity, in this case Salesforce. We may look at cyber intel information, which in this case there are none active. We may look at open source mentions, as I was showing you earlier, where we were doing the Cyber Threat Center and we showed some events, specific incidents mentioning in open source. In this case, there's 5 events showing Salesforce. We may do assessment on vulnerability, and we also may do an assessment of all the domains out there for phishing identification. So are there any domains out there that may identify a domain that has been stood up to do a targeted phishing attack? And so, let's come back to the overall goal here. The goal is to realize that a threat intelligence program has many different sources of information, intelligence feeds. There may be automation in terms of tools, such as the threat pool capability to aggregate and understand credentials, the ability to identify and score cyber scores, the ability to vet open source intelligence, but bring all of that together as part of a overall report that shows the overall view of that third party. So in summary, the key point is that assessing a third party does not require just one aspect of this intelligence. We may be looking at multiple aspects and then providing an aggregated view of that. Once you have that aggregated view, you may decide that you want to act on that aspect, and you may want to respond or push rules into your real-time protection system. This final demonstration, which is showing threat mitigation, is taking real-time data feeds and pushing it to a product category called a Threat Intelligence Gateway. That product can be integrated both with intelligence fields directly, or it can be integrated with a tip to allow you to take customized intelligence from the analyst stage and push it into the Threat Intel Gateway. And then that product is able to inspect real-time traffic that's passing through the network and decide on a packet-by-packet basis whether that data should be blocked or redirected, etc. Now, this is important because the intelligence feeds need to be vetted by analysts, because otherwise you will end up with potentially a lot of false positives. And so therefore you really need to be very accurate in the data that goes there. And that's a critical part of looking at the data feeds that we showed originally and looking at how to make sure that that data is not going to cause a lot of problems by blocking things that it should not. So let's switch to the demo. And I will show the screen. Oh, and the session is timed out. So I'm looking here at a Windows desktop, and what I'm looking here is the management system that is showing the management of that Threat Intelligence Gateway. Now, there are two types of rules that can be pushed on the system. There's the manual rules, which I'll demonstrate in a minute, but there's also this real-time aspect of global intelligence being pushed to it. You will see here at the bottom here, we have 38,000 rules that have been pushed automatically to the Threat Intelligence Gateway. Now again, this reiterates the need for automation and refinement using very complete, very comprehensive rules, because a human being would obviously never be able to review 38,000 rules themselves. And this system is automatically being updated in real time. So as we demonstrated originally with the infection map, where you saw the little dots showing up in the screen, this list is being updated in real time. And it's really important to realize that it's not just adding rules in real time, it's also removing rules as they are no longer considered active in the internet. And that is a huge burden if you had to manually configure all of those. And this system is automatically updating all of these in real time. So if we were to, for example, take one of these IP address, domains, and attempt to go to that domain in the browser, this browser is I apologize. I will copy. So if I now try to go to that URL, the system is automatically blocking the ability to go to that URL, and eventually the browser will time out. Now, if just to prove that this demo is real, I can go to Disney.com, and it will refresh the browser fine. And then just to reiterate, the browser was blocked by trying to go to that domain. Now, if I wanted to, I can go to manual rules. And if I click on manual rules, this is where I may want to add some additional intelligence directly to the system. So in this case, we are blocking books.disney.com, which is a legitimate site. But in this case, we're actually redirecting this site. So if I go back to the browser and click on books.disney.com, you will see that in this particular case, we're not blocking the communication. We're actually redirecting to a safe website where presumably you could inform the user of the desktop or whatever computer was getting redirected that their computer may be attempting to connect to something that they shouldn't. So to reiterate, the real-time data collection of intelligence feeds combined with operations to refine that data into a set of actionable intelligence that is relevant to your organization using the analysis and the threat intel programs that I showed you. The ability to then connect that to a system that is inspecting traffic in real time, your corporate traffic going over the perimeter, for example, be able to automatically block or redirect traffic with high confidence is a really critical part of a successful threat intel program. So coming back to our PowerPoint, the key points of a successful intel program. Focus on the data, make sure that you're getting the right data based on your requirements. Look at operations from a holistic approach, not just looking at a technical aspect, but look at people, the processes, how they're organized. Make sure that the operations fits the need of the organization or multiple needs. So look at, are we able to support brand protection? Are we allowed to, or can we support physical security? Are we looking at cyber threats the same way we're looking at open source? Are we able to provide a comprehensive overview of all of the threats that are focused on our organization? What analysis capabilities do we have? Are we able to refine the data from our operations team and look at deeper context? And does the data support that? And the tools allow you customization to allow you to fine-tune the data. What attack surfaces are out there? What vulnerabilities are we aware of on either our own networks, our third parties, or our supply chain? Shoring up the security of those three entities will significantly improve your security risk posture. And then finally, this pipeline from data all the way through operations to analysis, how do you mitigate? How do you respond and push that data into an online organization that potentially is doing real-time protection? And with that, I will end our webinar with any questions that we may have.
Awesome. Thank you, Alan. There are a few questions that have started to filter in, so let's see if we can address a couple of these. The first one says, what kind of capabilities within a tip are a must-have for good orchestration? Alan?
Sure. So I think one of the key things that we talked about in this slide where we were talking about operations really highlights some of the key parts. So, obviously the first part is the ability to gather all the different types of data that are relevant to you. So if you're only getting a subset of this data that we're highlighting here, so say you want to assess third parties, but you're not actually able to gather data on third parties for whatever reason. You don't have access to the open source or the commercial data feeds. So that's obviously step one is, go figure out where you can get the data. The second part is really having an organization to do real-time analysis and vetting of the data. And in our case, we've developed capabilities, both products as well as services, to able to ingest large amounts of data, as we showed, to be able to then refine that to a set of data that's actionable to be able to be pushed back into the organization. So if you're going to do that, do you have both the machines and the people and the capabilities to do all of that? If you don't, there are organizations, services organizations that can definitely support some of these activities. And as you consider them, you should be considering how mature they are. Are they able to take large amounts of data that may be relevant to your organization? Are they able to then refine it and provide to you, high confidence, high quality data that is needing to be acted on? If they just act as a conduit to a large amount of information that your organization ends up needing to review itself, then that's not really adding a lot of value. So look for both the tools and the capabilities that those tools are able to refine the data and identify patterns in the data, etc. And then look at the organization as a whole from an analyst expert perspective to be able to investigate that data.
Awesome. That was very thorough, and I appreciate that, Alan, because it looks like we're right about out of town. So we're going to have to wrap this up, but we greatly appreciate all that you've contributed to all 4 parts of this CSO series. And we greatly appreciate our audience for being present today for our presentation. If anybody didn't catch the full presentation or missed any of the other previous ones, they're all going to be posted to our website, so you can definitely check out the links that's listed under our events tab on our website, and that is www.lookingglasscyber.com. So please let us know if you've got any other questions. You can still send them in, and we will reply to you directly after the conclusion of this webcast. We do see a couple others that came in late, but we are out of time. So, Alan, again, thank you very much, and thanks, everybody, for being present. Anything else you'd like to add at this time, Alan?
No, thank you for spending the time, and appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.